the Yale edition is, I published the first edition in 2009. I published a second one, 2022. It is the text of the original text of the Book of Mormon as I've been able to construct it. We don't call it the original text because you really can't be sure of that, even though we textual critics love to say, I have got the original text. So I called it the earliest text because it was based on the earliest sources. And at the back, it has an appendix of about 700 and some of the important variants in the history of the text. It isn't a list comparing my edition versus the church's edition. In fact, in many cases, we agree, but it's just what are important variants in the history of the text. So the Yale edition does one. It's got all the bad grammar, which people have complained about, and Joseph Smith tried to remove, and it's all in there in the earliest text.
Tell us about the bad grammar, because I think the audience, like in them days, tell us what is that about?
In them days is about 2 or 3 of these in the original text, and there's they was yet wroth. They was yet wroth is in the original text. And they've been removed, and for a standard edition, there's no sense people reading, for most people, just to read something which will stop them and make them think about the language rather than what's the story, what's going on. So the church hasn't, has accepted Joseph Smith's attempt to clean up the bad English. And he made, in 1837, he made lots of changes to the text. 2% of them removed bad English, 2% of his changes.
When you say bad English, so you're a linguist, so linguists don't make judgments like that.
Well, it's my neighbors that make the judgment. If they're they was yet wroth, they'd say, what have you done, Brother Skousen? You put a bad English thing in our Book of Mormon, And I said, no, it was there originally, It would be something that they would consider dialectal, yokel, country folk, whatever.
So in other words, the Book of Mormon has forms of English that maybe that's the way Joseph Smith talked. Like instead of in those days, he would say in them days. Is that the explanation?
Well, that is how people have interpreted that.
Okay.
My colleague Stan Carmack, who's a linguist, started studying all the bad English, so-called, in the Book of Mormon, and discovered that it was all found in academic writing in the 1600s. You get examples of in them days in academic writing in 1560. So we have come to the hypothesis that the text is not Joseph Smith when it says in them days, but in fact, it's reflecting this archaic English that's would be prevalent in 1600s, even accepted. It wouldn't be considered bad English.
And I want to give an example here. So you're the expert of English, so you'll correct me if I'm wrong here. So, a lot of native English speakers in the United States, instead of ask, they say axe.
Yeah.
But there was a time when axe wasn't wrong. That was just a way that people spoke. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah. In Old English, you had both of them, ask and axe. King Alfred used axe. And then it became, in the United States, it became isolated with speakers in Appalachia and so forth. And Black speakers use it. They didn't invent it. Some people think that it's Black English, but it isn't. It's just the derivative of this.
And when was King Alfred who spoke that way?
He said axe. Well, there are lots of...
When was it? Like what century? I don't know him.
Well, King Alfred is about 800 A.D.
So in 800, people were saying axe. And
and ask. It was
and ask. Okay.
Some people would say ask. Originally, it was ask, and in Old English, it developed a variant axe, which is easier to pronounce. And so, for a long time in English, you had both of them. And but the Book of Mormon doesn't have any examples of.
No, but when it says in them days, it's not that it was wrong. It's just that's how some people spoke. Is that fair to
That's
say?
right. Well,
Okay.
and actually wrote in academic writing in the 1600s. And that's really hard for people to get. The Helsinki people, when they did these big data studies and they came across in them days, they were shocked. They thought, oh, only Hicks in America say in them days.
And that was one of the accusations. There was the guy in, I want to say he was in Ohio, who wrote the first critique of the Book of Mormon, and he says it was written in Yankee vernacular. Isn't that?
Yeah, that's right. And you see enough of those, you would say, oh, this is bad English. And it's just Joseph Smith. It's just Joseph Smith. That's, Stan Carmack and I have taken a really strong position that those don't represent Joseph Smith's bad English. So, there's so much other of the archaic language that is Joseph Smith's language, but it's in the Book of Mormon, makes us think we ought to accept these too.